Hi, this is Linda
And this is Leslie.
with Let's Talk. Today we are here with Michael Wahomey.
Hi, Michael. So nice to meet you. And Michael is going to talk to us about how does health impact our relationships.
Yes, tell us more, Michael.
We are all ears.
Okay, ladies. Well, I have a pretty long journey around my health, and it really started with my grandfather. And when I was young, I lived with him for I forget how many years. It seemed like a long time, but it was probably just a year or two. And during that time, we forged a fairly close relationship. So fast forward to I was reunited with my mom and dad, and my father was in the military. And I noticed that I was playing sports and working out, but he was physically deteriorating. And it surprised me because my understanding was if you are in the military, you should be in good shape 24/7 because you should be ready to go at a moment's notice. Now, it just continued through, high school, through college, and it turned out that he developed diabetes. He developed hypertension. And at the age of 52, which is younger than I am now, he suffered a moderate stroke. He recovered, but it left him with, one side being weak, as a lot of people who have strokes tend to go through. Now, that by itself wasn't significant. It's just that his father, my grandfather, lived to be into his 90s, early 90s. And throughout his life, he was active, he was a farmer. And even when he, completely retired, he would still go for 5 mile walks almost every day. And finally, what killed him was his kidneys shut down. But I think at the age of 90, you're sort of, you're allowed to have a pretty catastrophic health issue. Okay. Um, so from that sort of having these two people in my life, these two men in my life, I realized that you know that there was something there that caused my granddad to live to be a ripe old age, no health issues, and then for my father to develop diabetes, hypertension, and eventually have a stroke. As a result of my activities, working out, running, we used to play rugby, back in the day. It's a game called rugby. I developed chronic pain in my knees, right? In my mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s. And my knees became so painful that I could not work out. I couldn't go to the gym and do squats or leg press. Um, Running up and down stairs became painful. And I went to the orthopedist, and he told me that I had a genetic condition called chondromalacia patella. I'd never heard of it. And as far as I knew, no one else had it. But, sometimes when people have illnesses, they just assume it's, age, it's sports related, etc. However, the pain set me on a path. And this path was to find a way to deal with it. Okay. And I'm one of those people who doesn't like prescriptions. I don't like medicine. I'll take Tylenol every now and then, but I usually will avoid anything that comes in a bottle, as far as a prescription. But at that time, there was new research coming out about how to handle chronic arthritis, because that's what I thought I had. And there were things called chondroitin and glucosamine, which are supposed to help rebuild the joint cartilage. And so I started taking those because they were not prescriptions. You could buy them at, any health food store. And it reduced the pain to a certain extent. And then, as time went on, I kept doing the research, and it turned out that a lot of us, because of the food we eat and the lifestyles that we live and the stresses we're exposed to, we develop inflammation in our entire bodies. And this becomes chronic. Okay. And for me, it happened to show up as pain in my knees. For other people, it may be outbreaks on your skin, it may be your hair falling out. There's just so many ways in which this pain shows up or the inflammation shows up. But it can even show up as, changes in your eyesight, because of inflammation or due to nutritional deficiencies or nutritional issues. And so I thought, oh, so if it's inflammation, well, let me try some things. Again, staying away from prescriptives. I started, I went more, more heavy vegetarian. I reduced, my eating of red meat. I started eating things like, celery and blueberries and, all the things that have antioxidants and anti-inflammatories in them. And the most interesting thing is that my pain decreased and decreased and decreased to the point that today, this year, or last year, I turned 58. I have no pain in my knees. So, the trajectory that we're supposed to take is as we get older, we have more problems with our bodies. And now I go to the gym. Now I work out. Now I do squats. This morning, I just did a 5.5-mile hike in the hills up here. No problems. You see? So I know that this thing works for me personally. The challenge, of course, is how do I communicate that with my wife, the children, and the other folks around me who have issues. Everybody I know, even a good friend of mine, had a heart scare a couple of years ago. I had been telling him, hey, cut back on meat, cut back on this. Now, one day I went to his house and he's got, kale smoothies and this and that. And I said, hey, what happened? He said, oh, the doctor gave me some bad news. I said, okay, that's what it takes. So obviously the people I care the most about are my children. And one of the challenges was, they don't like my cooking. Okay. They said, Dad, thanks for cooking, but mom's food tastes way better. Right. And this is good. I mean, I'm happy because that way I don't have to cook. But the problem, and this was probably maybe even 10, 11 years ago, was that I couldn't convince my wife to make the dietary changes that would turn whatever she was cooking for the children, which is really tasty, into a more nutritious, lower inflammation diet, which would also be tasty. And we went for a period of time with me trying to say to her, hey, and this is where the relationship comes in, where, we're raising the children and we're both committed to the children, but we have two different perspectives on something as important as what goes into their mouths, right? And I couldn't win that battle, and, there's sometimes she would cook and I wouldn't eat what she cooked. I'd cook my own food because, it was loaded with, too much meat or, the wrong kind of oil, or just, I looked at it and I knew this is inflammation, and on a plate. Luckily for me, the organization she works for, they, as part of the health insurance plan, asked her to do a physical. It's like, hey, you're on this plan, you got to get an annual physical. And they ran up some blood work. And one day she came home, opened up the refrigerator and just started throwing stuff out. And I kind of looked at her and I thought, oh, what happened? And she wouldn't tell me, but she threw out all the meat, all the red meat, all the cheeses, all the, all that stuff. I can't even tell you the stuff that was in that refrigerator. And I looked at her and I said, something happened. And if you don't want to tell me, that's okay, but something has happened. Because from that day on, we started getting nothing but organic. We dropped our protein, our animal fat, and if we ate any meat, it was probably fish, which isn't technically meat. Or if it was beef, it was organic, it was sourced, it was grass-fed as opposed to soy-fed, because all those things affect your body if you eat the wrong food, okay? In addition to that, she became a lot more physically active. And it was very interesting because the children didn't really notice any change because the food still tasted good. And, children are programmed, they come home from school, they eat what mom puts in front of them and they go do their homework, and go watch cartoons or whatever. And so what ended up happening was we then began to see eye to eye in the kitchen, and I told her, I'm so glad you finally stopped poisoning my children. Right? I couldn't have said that before, but that's how I felt. I felt she was poisoning my children, because what people don't understand is that the food that a child grows up eating is what they will continue to eat. Right? And that's why we have so many health problems these days, because what has happened is people grew up eating, I don't know, grandma's cooking.
Yeah.
And it tasted fantastic. right? But that stuff is what's causing hypertension and diabetes and, the whole, metabolic syndrome where you're overweight and your hormones are out of whack. And it just goes on, right? And so that was my other concern. My other concern was they would grow up eating this stuff. Anyway, so she changed that, and then two things happened. Within 30 days, she had been instructed, okay, go make these changes to your diet, and let's run your blood work again after 30 days. Do you know that her numbers improved like dramatically? I never knew what they were, HIPAA, et cetera, but she never told, but I know that they improved dramatically because she told me her doctor told her, hey, you've done a really good job. Well, so that's her, okay, which then directly impacts my children. Now, fortunately, my kids were fairly athletic, my son especially. He's the one I was most concerned about as far as just eating bad, developing bad eating habits. So the other thing I encouraged him to do was he liked cross country, so I encouraged him to continue in cross country. And then I would suggest to him, hey, the night before you have an important run, just eat a salad. Okay, eat a salad with beets and things like that. It's like, Dad, he's a teenager. Dad, I don't want to eat this. I said, just try it. Okay. And I said, hey, babe, could you make him this salad? Because she would make it look pretty and tasty and etc. And he came back so many times and he said, you know what? When I eat the salad the night before, I run much faster and it's easier, right? And there's a scientific basis behind that because if you eat a fatty meal, the night before anything, that the next day your blood, your arteries and your capillaries have lost their elasticity, right? So your heart has to work harder to pump blood through your body because your blood vessels are supposed to be elastic and it's supposed to be nice and flexible, you see. So all these things, so he's a believer. My daughter was never she didn't resist a lot. She wants to go to medical school, so she's already very health conscious. So that's now my wife and my children. Then my mother-in-law started to develop issues, right? Well, guess who was her consultant? Now my wife, the former resistor, was now telling her mother, hey, get off the cheese, lay off the wine, start exercising. And my mother-in-law today is very healthy for a woman her age, you see? And so this thing has sort of, it started off where there was, I'm sort of downplaying it now, but I was very upset, because she was feeding my kids this food that I knew was bad. But once that happened, now we're, when I say, hey, let's go for a hike, let's, do this, do that, there's value in eating well and then feeling your body doing well, right? The other factor, of course, is just rest. If you are not eating properly, you can't sleep properly, right? If you're eating the wrong kind of food, the wrong time of the day. And so if you don't sleep, just lack of sleep, that raises your cortisol, which is an inflammation hormone, right? And so the other thing was, okay, regular bedtime. Okay, for my children, it was easy. I told them 8 p.m., your pillow, at least when they were younger, your head needs to be on your pillow at 8 o'clock. I don't care whether you're sleepy, not sleepy. I want your head on your pillow. And, most children, once they go to bed, they fall asleep. Of course, now they're in college. That's something I have no control over. And the same thing for my wife. I would say, look, you're constantly complaining about being tired in the morning. First of all, you're not eating right. But the other thing is you need to go to sleep at a consistent time, right? And then wake up at a consistent time. And now we're good. For me, I'm usually in bed around 9:30 and I'm usually awake around 4 a.m. That's just my cycle. But when I wake up, I don't use an alarm clock. I am completely clear. My mind is clear. I'm ready to go. So if you had scheduled this for 4 a.m., I'll be good. You see, instead of the time we scheduled it for. So I just mentioned my friend who lives in South Africa. He has been an athlete we went to high school. Actually, we were in elementary school together. And he had those issues. And as a runner, I knew very well that the diet he was eating was not good. One of the things I said to him, I said, look, remember when we were in high school, I told you I would never get I would never get a big stomach. Remember those days? Because both our fathers had big stomachs, right? And he said, yeah. I said, now you have a big stomach like your father did. I don't. Okay. So clearly there's something that we're doing that's different, because when I was in high school, all through college, I wore my waist size, my pant size was 31. Now at this age, my waist size is 32. So in, almost 40 years, I've only gained an inch.
Wow.
It's pretty good, huh?
Michael, I have to interrupt you because you need to give us one tip. And I'm just going to speak to me. Linda's probably more active, but one thing that you can say to someone who wants to start this journey, what's the first thing they should do?
Go through your pantry. And if you have, like most of us do, spices, right, to flavor your food. And most of the spices are shop bought. They're not, you don't grind them, and very few people grind their own spices, right? Look at the sodium content.
Okay.
Look at the sodium content. And usually they have too much salt, but you can buy spices that are completely salt-free. Okay. Organic is better. So I'll tell you another unrelated story, but it answers your question. There's when I was working up in the Bay Area, there's a lady I met. She was a customer, and she was having health issues, and she was like, well, because I needed to set up an appointment. She said, well, this day I got a doctor's appointment and this and that. I'm nosy. I said, oh, are you all right? She says, no, I've got this crazy high blood pressure, right? And I was in her house. And I said, oh, really? And I think she was probably in her early 40s. I mean, and so I said, well, you shouldn't have that much high blood pressure. And she wasn't, she was, overweight, but she wasn't obese. And I said, when is your appointment? She said, oh, it's in 2 weeks. I said, would you be willing to try something? Would you be willing to let me look through your pantry and see what's in there? And she's, why? I said, I'm a bit of a health nut. There might be something in there that's giving you high blood pressure. And sure enough, it was sodium, every spice. She's an African-American lady. She loved to cook, and all her spices had salt. So I said, look, step number one, throw all this out. She was willing to do it. So threw it out, went to some local store over there that had completely salt-free spices. We replaced the entire thing. And I said, just let me know what happens. 2 weeks later, when she went to get her doctor's appointment, get her prescription for her high blood pressure, they measured her blood pressure, and it was back to normal. And they said, you don't need any medication. One thing, okay? One thing. Now, one of the biggest dangers of high blood pressure is kidney failure. It leads to kidney failure, right? Chronic hypertension will lead to kidney failure. And so this is another real problem that people don't understand. But the 2 weeks, just think about it, okay? That's the first thing. Throw out whatever's in your pantry. Stop buying meat. You can live without meat. You can live without meat. Eat meat once a month. If anything, eat, wild caught salmon, things like that. Don't buy farm-raised fish because they have toxins. The other thing is, depending on, where you are and things like that. Obviously out here in Southern California, we're spoiled because we're good going outdoors all year round. But it would be good to get 30 minutes of exercise a day, right? And that can be as simple as put on the appropriate attire for the weather, take a 15-minute walk away from your house with a timer. When you get to 15 minutes, turn around and come back home.
Okay.
That's it. And walk as briskly as you can, obviously the right shoes and things like that. That simple thing within a very short time will have you feeling better. But ideally you should know, well, how am I doing now, so that you can then measure, I don't know, 30 days later, like, what's your blood pressure like? What's your blood work like? What are your cholesterol numbers? Most people say, hey, you should know your credit score. You should know the amount of money in your bank account. You should know these things, but do you know what your numbers are?
Yeah.
Do you know if you're vitamin deficient? Okay. People who have this skin tone are chronically vitamin D deficient, chronically. Why? One, we spend time indoors. Two, we live in the Northern Hemisphere.
That's
So
true.
we never get enough sun. We're designed to, we were made in another continent,
Yeah.
where the sun all the time. And so we have to take supplements. Why? Because if you're vitamin D deficient, it suppresses your immune system. And if your immune system is suppressed, the biggest danger is that your cancer can grow. It grow, that's why Black men have the highest incidence of prostate cancer, right? Why? Because their immune system isn't fighting the cancer cells. You see, so there's so many ramifications. It's mind-boggling. So that's the one thing, dump too much sodium, throw that out, and then you can add salt to taste, either at the table or as you're cooking, because everybody has different flavors. So I think that from my personal experience, I like to be in decent shape. It's important, to have the ability, especially when the kids were younger, to keep up with them.
Yeah.
Right. And also to be there. I don't want to be the guy who kicks the bucket because of health reasons, avoidable ones. When my son's 22, when the day he was born, I made him a promise. I said, I'll be there for sure until you graduate college. After that, I may take a trip around the world, but I'm going to be there, and he's a sophomore this year, and, we're good, so these are the sort of things that people need to hear. A lot of times we go to the doctor, we get prescriptions, and those prescriptions have other problems, right? My brother-in-law suffers from gout. And I said, dude, too much wine, too much seafood. I mean, shellfish and shrimp and all that is fantastic. It tastes good, but it's really high in cholesterol, and the metabolic products, cause the uric acid crystals. And sometimes, and he's a chef, so he had to work on his feet, and he's tasting all this food. I said, you don't have to taste it. Not like that, cut back on the wine. And I told him for years and years, and finally he said, Mike, you were right all along. I'm like, okay. I don't need you to tell me I was right. I knew I was right, because everything I'm talking about is based in science.
What about water, Michael? I know a lot of people talk about water. Can you talk about that, the water intake?
Yes. Yeah. So, they say drink 8 glasses of water a day. I don't know where the number 8 came from. I would say, okay, and I don't know if you can put this on the podcast, but just look at the color of your pee when you pee, right? If it isn't clear, you don't have enough water in your body.
Yeah.
Because that's how, the purpose of urine is to remove toxins, right? So if you're not removing toxins, it's just like your kitchen. It's dirty. The trash is overflowing, so that's why you should drink water. And people will be like, yeah, well, I drink all this juice. I'm like, well, yeah, but the juice has sugar. I drink soda. Yeah, but the soda has sugar. I drink hot chocolate. The hot chocolate has sugar. Okay. So the point is, why not start the day with a glass of water? And if it's too cold, drink it warm. You can warm it, right? Warm your water. And make sure you know where your water's coming from. Does it have crap in it? Well, then that's not helping, right? Drink bottled, distilled water. Even some people I know drink distilled water. You can buy distilled water, and that way, and say, oh, it doesn't have the minerals. I'm like, okay, well, it's a trade-off. You can get your minerals from green leafy vegetables, from root crops like carrots and sweet potato and yams. But if you eat spinach, if you eat kale, if you eat chard, you eat cabbage, there's so many ways to, and so this is a really interesting story. Every 5 years, what do? You go to your Department of Motor Vehicles and you get to a new picture, right? Or these days, I forget whether it's 5 or 10 years. So when my wife made all these changes, right? And when it was time to renew her driver's license, well, a static picture really shows you that difference, right? So here's the picture from 5 years ago to the current one, right? Of that time. She was puffy, like her whole face was puffy, and I said, look, and she's like, I can't believe it. I said, yeah, you were retaining water.
Wow.
I mean, women retain water anyway, that's
Yeah.
part of their cycle, right? But she was literally chronically retaining water, right? But once she did that, you just reduce all those toxins in your body. And because what people don't know is that the reason you add weight, a lot of people think it's just calories, right? But what has happened to your body is that your body sometimes cannot remove the toxins in your body. So it builds a layer of fat to store the poison. Can you believe that?
That's interesting. Wow.
So one of the first things that happens to people, and all my friends who've listened to me, when they stop eating meat without changing anything else, they lose weight. Just that one thing. You just notice, you're just dropping the pounds.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're no longer building the inflammation. You're not building, the toxin, the need for a place to store your toxins. You drink water and so now if you couple that with more greens, right? Actually, I was just telling my buddies this week, because, Super Bowl's coming up. So we're discussing Tom Brady's diet. He's 43, he's training like a madman. He's, the most winningest quarterback, right? And his diet is 80% vegetable. So at that high level of athleticism, he's eating 80% vegetable. Wow. Virtually no meat. He has his cheat days, but he eats mainly wild caught fish. Plus multivitamins and all these things. So it's not just Michael Holmes saying that you need to eat more greens. It's the science, it's the science. And we weren't designed to be eating meat every day, every meal, right?
Mike, I'm going to ask another question. Just what about, and I'm just going to gear it towards women. What about women going through the time of life?
Yes.
And you have those, and not you, but women have those hot flashes.
Yeah, I got one right here. She's flashing, frequently and often. Yes.
And what do you suggest to help alleviate that if you're not trying to do the over-the-counter stuff?
That's something that we are still working with. And when I say we, because we discuss diet, a lot, and she will tell me, I'm trying to remember, she went for a period of time, weeks and weeks, without any hot flashes at all, like none, right? And it turned out that, she had sort of eliminated raw oil, meaning raw avocado oil, raw olive oil, right? She used to cook with canola oil, which is not supposed to be eaten by people, right? It's not a natural oil at all. So we kind of threw that out. That was the other fight, because she'd buy it and I'd throw it out. But anyway, that's another story, because I can be stubborn like that. So she stopped eating raw oil. She cut back on spices. Okay, there's certain spices, and I don't know exactly, because she's the one who cooks, but she said, oh, I stopped eating this spice and that spice and that spice, and the hot flashes just got real calm, but in addition to eating well and exercising and things like that. So I can only, this is just anecdotal, right? Because obviously I haven't had any need to sort of investigate these things. But I think that there's enough information and knowledge out there that I'm sure that there are ways to manage it, because she doesn't have hot flashes all the time. I mean, sometimes she'll be fine. And then sometimes it seems to be the time of day. I don't know. It's got to the point where my mom used to have them. I was like, oh my God. Then she stopped, and then my wife picked it up, and well, yeah. So from a guy's perspective, we lose our hair and we manage somehow, and you all have hot flashes.
Yeah. So nobody's gets away from all that.
Right.
Peppermint oil helps with hot flashes.
Say that again. Which?
Peppermint oil.
To
help with hot flashes.
Apply it?
Yeah, you put it a little bit on the back of your neck.
Well, there you go.
There are different types of oils, natural oils.
To use for that. But Michael, this has just been, wealth of information. I feel like I'm gonna go through my cabinet, and I'm so serious and look at the things, and definitely with this. And I took notes. That's why I'm saying this. I took notes.
Yes.
Eating meat once a month, and I'm not really a big meat eater.
Right.
But to exercise more regularly,
Yeah, you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to get a big old gym membership. Just walk, brisk. Yeah, and be faithful. Be faithful. Just go every day, Yeah.
I like that. This has been great. And especially how it affects relationships, Linda. I never even thought about that, but it's true because how you eat affects everybody around you.
Yeah, and so we have an epidemic, right? Now you're married women, and you know about this stuff, but I don't know who's going to be listening to this. But there's an epidemic of erectile dysfunction, right? In this country, yeah. And part of what's happening is that the reason they're calling it an epidemic is because the age at which this is happening to men is dropping, late 30s, 40s, and so traditionally, men were able to handle their business well into their 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
But the reason is it's very simple physiologically, right? If your capillaries and your arteries are clogged, right, or inflamed due to diabetes or a bad diet or both, well, that part of your body needs proper blood flow, right? And so a lot of times the doctors are starting to use that as the old canary in the coal mine, and they're saying, well, because the canaries used to let the miners know if there was poisonous gas because the bird would die, and then they'd know to get out of there. So if, as a man, you can't function properly in that area, that means your cardiovascular system is about to let you down. You're about to keel over, literally.
My Lord.
And we know that, yes, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, people are dying. But if you look at the stats, approximately 600,000 people a year in the United States die from cardiovascular problems. And most of those cardiovascular problems are caused by what we put in our mouths. So it can be, completely controlled. So there's so many reasons to think about this and to be concerned.
Yeah. This has been very enlightening, Linda and Michael. I'm just so excited about this topic. And I feel like we really need to talk even more and more and more because there's so much to cover in just a short time. And, we're talking about life's lessons, and this is a life's lesson when we're talking about eating right for our health, eating for life. Basically, that's what it is, because it affects so many other people. So I truly appreciate you, Michael, for joining us today. And I want you to come back. Linda, would you say the same? I think you have to be maybe one of our standing guests, if your schedule allows, just to talk more about ways to better our lives, and eating is one of them.
Sure. I'll be happy to.
Cool. Do you want to say your quote?
Oh, well, sure. Absolutely. Because that's really what this is all about. It's about life's lessons. It's about laughter so we can live a little bit longer, and love, because the ultimate goal is to make relationships that last. And hey, if you like what you heard today, please be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel so you can get more information from people just like Michael, because I know there are so many people out there like me who need to hear this. And if you were listening in and you were taking notes like me, we're going to be well on our way to a healthier lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.